6 or 7 emails is sometimes what it takes to get a response. And as long as the emails are gracious, are generous, and aren't coming, every 24 hours, then there's nothing wrong with sending follow-up emails, right? Like most buyers, like we don't have admin time. We're in service 99% of the time, and the other 1%, we're putting out fires with staffing, with, all kinds of other internal stuff.
This is really a questions curated from the brand owners and the suppliers. Many people are joining around from the world. So I've just taken exact questions and pasted it for you guys out here. So this will be more of a Q&A session, right? So let's just dive right into this call.
Getting one small account to get on board with you, and then doing an exposure event that, is on a Monday or a Sunday where most bartenders are off, most buyers are off. And it's a great way to just expose the local community to what you're doing. Outreach. So this could be, if email's out of the question, hitting people up through Instagram, other types of social media, LinkedIn, all of that. Our inboxes as buyers are always just completely buried. So other methods of access can be really meaningful. And then if all of that fails, dropping samples can be really helpful as well.
But I think I remember we recently had a chat and you gave one more idea, which was throwing a competition or something, right? Like a cocktail competition, and that way brands can just, if you can elaborate that idea.
Doing a small scale, like local to a market cocktail competition is a really great way to get liquid into bartenders' hands and get them playing around with it. And then, of course, you engage the community and you can have an event around the actual live competition in which a whole bunch of the local community will show up to support their bartending team. And they'll taste the liquid, they'll taste the cocktails, they'll taste the creations. So that can be a really great way to get exposure.
What are the most common KPIs looked at by the buyers, right? So, you can try to be as generic, and also what you particularly look for when designing a new brand.
So I want to speak a little bit for what concerns my side, as Nora said, but for sure, something that I'm personally looking as a KPIs are definitely the brand recognition, the sustainability, right now it became pretty big because it also gives an opportunity to the people that we are working with, and servers, bartenders, they are in the end responsible to sell the products, right? So they also need to believe into, and the sustainability right now became a really big point. And perhaps probably my last would be like a little bit more innovation and adaptability. So also like see different products coming into the market and why they're so special.
What do you mean by adaptability? Is that the mixability?
Correct.
Okay.
Mixability, and also the ability to incorporate the specific liquid, not necessarily like a spirit, but can be also wine, into a cocktail.
Dayonel, what marketing activities you do to build the brand in the market and create brand awareness? Any tips there?
Okay, so you mentioned a few ones already, like cocktail competitions. That it's also a good one because you get exposure to bartenders, of course, with your brand. A master class is also nice. People in the industry, they really appreciate knowledge. So when you do master class and you bring the master distillers, master blenders, or brand ambassadors to talk a little bit about the history, the process, the unique points of your brand, that creates engagement and rapport from the industry professionals. So that is a good one as well. Dinners, spirit dinners, for example, tequila dinner, whiskey dinner. If you get one account to create a menu designed to pair with your spirit, and you create a dinner, and then you get a group of regulars or VIPs from that place to attend the dinner and become more aware of the brand and try it in different expressions, neat, with a cocktail, and maybe also using one of the dishes, dessert or something like that. that creates a really lasting experience and memory for the customers. So I believe those are fun ways to create exposure and awareness.
Susan, this one's for you. With all the international success Australian distillers are having in recent years, why hasn't that translated to great demand, especially in US?
I love this question because it's such a big one. It's an important one to help us understand just how connected we are globally in our markets. So the great thing about Australian spirits is that distillers there's so much, they've been doing smart things like entering spirits competitions and, giving themselves exposure. And so, but at the same time, there are some pretty great domestic growth, but their export market has still been difficult. And one of the biggest reasons for this is actually because of the government excise taxes that are raised twice yearly to stay in line with the consumer price index. And although Australian spirits comprises about 20% of all alcoholic consumption in terms of volume for Australia, it comprises over 50% of the tax revenue that it brings in. And because of the fact that so many of Australian distilleries are actually quite small, over 80% are under 20 people, I believe, and also many of them are under 5 years old. There's a lot of excitement here. There's a lot of people who are innovating. And so there's so much opportunity here, but they have stated that it's been difficult for foreign investment to come in, and also for them to try to scale because of the amount of work that would take in terms of these excise taxes, making it more difficult for them to do so. So the good news is that there was recently a parliamentary inquiry that went in for the government to invite people such as the Spirits and Cocktails Association and the National Distillers of Australia to make their case. And I think one of the areas of opportunity I hope that Australians will do in this sector is that I've noticed that so many distillers actually come from the wine world. The wine industry receives a lot of good support from the government, and they have huge pavilions at Provine and places like that. And trade shows is one really good way to get in front of people and to be able to educate people about the fact that Australia has great spirits and to educate them about the terroirs and the provenance to get into people's mind share. So hopefully those people who have ties with the wine world and all these distilleries can also help leverage their contacts to lobby with the government in that way. But what about the parts that we can't control, maybe about the government? There are, I think, it's 29th in spirits exports right now. And so what I really think the possibilities are to collaborate with strategic partners with whom the spirits brand has strong synergies, like it's complementary to the type of aspirational lifestyle desired to co-market. In this way, the brand can leverage the existing customer base of the partner and marketing budget, be able to gain more exposure in the US market. And of course, as was mentioned by my colleagues here, partnering with strategic on-premise partners in major US cities to create featured cocktails, highlighting the brand and Australian provenance of the spirit. I mean, people know their favorite bars and restaurants, they trust their bartenders, and they will ask what the spirit is if they like the cocktail and it catches their attention. And again, I think this might take a larger organizational effort, but brands can actually, if they have the budget, I would strongly recommend to focus on that as well, is to invest in educational programs for industry members and to extend invitations for visits, educational visits, because there's nothing like people experiencing something and be able to tell the story to everybody that they know and their followers when they go back, or to share it with their partners and managers and restaurant partners. So I think that is one area where hopefully a distiller's Australian body will help to be able to support. But in the meantime, if you're a brand and you have that kind of budget, or you're partnering with that brand, make it happen. Invite people in America, in US cities who have some good influence to be able to bring back their stories and of your brand and the Australian story.
Do you think that the little bit of decline, or let's say stabilization in Australian wine category, is also one of the factors where they're known for wine, and the wine is a little bit hard these days for Australia? It's even harder to bring back the category of Australian spirits.
You mean how?
Do you think that Australian wine affects Australian spirits chances?
I mean, in terms at face value, I think that they can exist pretty independently, because I think people don't really associate the
Okay.
Australian wine and spirits in the same category at all. In fact, I think there's a lot more association with interesting stories and cachet with Australian spirits, because they do tend to be very like small, and people love that sort of craft feel. They want to hear these stories. They want that authenticity. Whereas the Australian wine market, in terms of the perspective from US buyers and consumer base, has been a little bit more difficult to turn around into the premium sector because of precedents set in the past. Yes.
Jacopo, how to pitch if you are a startup and don't have much of a sales history, right? Like when you ask a supplier that how is this brand performing in other markets and the seller has no data, what's your tip?
For sure, focus on highlighting your product strengths, the difference that your product has, and the potential impact that your product could have in the market. Once again, something that I would pitch is like the difference that this product has, the quality, the taste, the innovation that you brought in order to make this new spirit, and perhaps also pitching through some partnership endorsement from the industry, like bartenders or even customers, I want to say.
So do you think that this is a major factor in your all buying decisions, where it's a new brand and obviously they don't have much of a sales history?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when you don't have a sales history, I mean, in my opinion, you should be focused on which your strengths are. It's like why is different, why I should buy it. Those,
Understood.
in my opinion, are the
Nora, how can a small brand support itself in early stages? It doesn't have a big budget. What are some ways to be a good partner? So let's say, what are some 5 or 6 super small budget, good ROI tips for marketing?
I would say first and foremost, make sure you know your account base. I think anybody who's worked a market can basically go through a set of accounts and understand by looking at their cocktail menu and looking at their back bar and looking at their spirits list what type of buyer this is, right? Is this a buyer that's interested in exploring new brands, that's interested in craft and bespoke liquids? Or is this a buyer who is maybe a little bit more interested in brand partnerships and in kind of bigger brands where the dollars are taking them? So, I think it's really important, and it's often overlooked for smaller brands to go in and actually explore the marketplace, show up at these bars, have a cocktail or two, kind of understand what the point of view is and what the perspective is of that account. And then understanding how to meet that account and reach across the aisle in a way that's meaningful to that account, right? So instead of just a boilerplate kind of, sales pitch, having something that's really tailored and really specific. One of the pleasures of being a small brand and working with small brands is that they're nimble and that they're willing to kind of step into a different world in order to create something that can be truly unique and truly exciting. So, I'd say, a few examples of that, and we've touched on a bunch of them already, but is, just talking about smaller activations that are really offering something to the account itself. If it's a retail account, often just showing up and doing demos and tastings is the right way to partner, because then you're actually just able to expose the liquid to their consumer base and to their customers. If it's an on-premise account, often it's doing a happy hour where there's some featured cocktails on the menu. It's focusing and on education, right? Education is hugely important. And it's often, again, overlooked by some of the bigger brands that don't have that in their wheelhouse. So it's an opportunity to come in, offer it doesn't necessarily need to be a masterclass. It could just be, most bars and restaurants have a lineup every day or a pre-shift. And so this is a chance to talk for 5 to 10 minutes to the entire team about the liquid, get them on board with it and get them exposure to it.
Agree 100%. Store tastings is amazing.
Yeah.
Same follow up. You can hang in here. If an email goes unanswered from the buyer, which I'm sure most of the cases you guys get a lot of emails, so politely you can't answer everything. What's the next best way to set up an appointment without being too pushy?
Yeah, I'll tell you a little, just a brief story. So in 2016, I was working on getting my first restaurant open in San Francisco with my business partner. And I was broke, as many of us are when we're trying to get something off the ground. And so I picked up a gig as a brand ambassador, which I had never done before. And this was for a then unknown non-alcoholic spirits brand called Seedlip.
Wow.
Granted, this was 2016. So this was, before non-alcoholic spirits meant anything, before the category existed. So I will say, I have a lot of experience with unanswered emails. I was often laughed out of bars and retail accounts. Nobody really, it took a while for people to come around to the idea of a non-alcoholic distilled spirit. So we had this thing, which is very British, and Seedlip is a British company, but it was be a charming pest. So be charming, be gracious, be polite. But it's okay to send a lot of emails. It's okay to show up if you're doing it in a way that's gracious, that's polite, and that isn't impeding on the buyer's time, on their service. In my experience, and being on both sides of the board, like 6 or 7 emails is sometimes what it takes to get a response. And as long as the emails are gracious, are generous, and aren't coming, every 24 hours, then there's nothing wrong with sending follow-up emails, right? Like most buyers, like we don't have admin time. We're in service 99% of the time, and the other 1%, we're putting out fires with staffing, with, all kinds of other internal stuff. So, the ability to maintain our inboxes isn't really top priority. So I would say, don't take it personally if you don't get a response. Send follow-up emails, but make sure that they're polite and charming and they're coming at appropriate times. Hit people up through Instagram, through LinkedIn, through TikTok, or whatever people are using, whatever platform you see them on. Feel free to just, you can ping them through that. And then, of course, show up at their business, and don't show up as somebody whose angle is to try to get an appointment. Show up as somebody who's honoring and who's celebrating what that person is doing in their space, and recognize that, and that is always a really meaningful follow-up email, is to say, hey, I was in your bar last week and I had a really beautiful cocktail. I noticed that you have chartreuse on your menu. Chartreuse is really hard to come by these days. I have a really cool chartreuse alternative. Maybe it would be interesting for you to taste it next week or the week following or whatever. So, having that personal angle, having that personal touch, I think goes very, very far in getting engagement.
Susan, how do you support a spirits brand in another market? I think pretty much the same, but maybe you can add a few more examples on a small budget marketing.
Yeah, I have to thank Nora for having put that so beautifully.
Yep.
In fact, everybody who's spoken, this will all roll into this. So yeah, what if you don't have that much money? But starting small is a great way to go, because again, those personal experiences are going to be so important. I mean, you can go one to many in certain ways, but the first thing you have to figure out is, who are you and what do you represent? So, and basically in all of psychology research, people have realized that we are brought together and we foster trust by telling each other stories. And so crafting a narrative is so incredibly important. And this is a lot of the work that I do. In fact, I do a lot of research on this to be able to help brands to be able to create narratives, sometimes using sound, in this case, is what I specialize in, but also in writing, right? What is your story? Because once you know who you are and what you represent, where you came from, you're going to be able to share that story in a way that is passionate and that people will be able to connect with. And once you have that connection, not only can you do that with people personally, like in your strategic and targeted visits and invitations to people, just like Nora was saying, if you just, show up somewhere or email people, I've gotten so many offers where it's tough to read the emails. When you get it, you're like, you don't even know who we are and you didn't do any research on us. And it would behoove you greatly to just at least figure out who you're talking with, and try to add some sort of, saying that I know who you are, and this is what I think would be great for you, and this is why we think this would be great for you, or take a look, you may be curious, so once you know your story, you're going to be able to have that power to be able to do everything else that you do in terms of your very small budget, make that go a long way, because not only will you be able to tell that story in your in-person invitations and visits, starting and partnering, making a pitch to do local partnerships, local sponsorships for, like, say, a food and wine festival, things like that. Start small and get your name out there, and to show that you have some sort of civic or community involvement, and to be able to be associated with the good feelings that go along with that. Say, sports events or any sort of cultural events, performing arts and such. Those often have a lot of cachet too. And if you're able to bring and donate some of your spirit there, and have it featured in gala events or other things like that, that can give you a lot of attention from a customer base that is already part of your partners. So that's a great way to do it. And then again, once you have your story, you can then try to go from the one to many by doing social engagement and conversion, right? So we've all heard before, social media is important. Yes, but we're talking about here not just putting things out willy-nilly. I mean, try to create new hashtags, engage people with, invite them. It doesn't have to be a contest. It could be a contest, but that's one way to be able to get people to share, what they're doing. Because what people do on social media is they're sharing their experiences, and you want to be that part of that conversation, right? And so if people have questions, respond to them, engage with them. If people have comments, so they share something, leave a nice comment, reshare it, pin it, things like that, because people love it when they feel like they've been noticed and they've been acknowledged, and you're going to start building that sense of loyalty in them. And that's just so important in terms of that mind share. So yeah, and share behind the scenes photos on Instagram, say, and be able to make yourself approachable, be able to tell your unique story, shape that narrative, and share interesting facts about your product or tips on how to enjoy your spirit through, at-home cocktails or whatever it is, through reels that other people can share. Those are always great too. So again, in that vein, you can also invite, like, small select group of people, this was mentioned before, to be able to influential in your target markets, to give them a private exclusive experience where you will be able to, at pretty much not too much of a cost, be able to put the liquid in front of them, tell them your story, and give them an experience that very few other people have had, and encourage them to share that story. So again, make it personal, reach out, the one-to-one, the one-to-few, one-to-many. Again, when you have a strong narrative, it will be able to go a long way with not too much budget.
Super. I think I'll add one more thing, which I'm hearing from a lot of sommeliers and bartenders here. The right tip is to educate the category or the region instead of your own product. So talk more about, advocate the whole thing. Like, if you're educating the bartending team, educate on mezcal instead of your own mezcal brand, for example. So I think that is a solid way to keep talking, and then you will be valued more.
Absolutely.
Dayonel, what spirits category do you want to see more? And this question is for everyone. So let's just, maybe you can start this. So what are the 3 or 4 trends that you're seeing that you'll be buying more? And maybe, pick 1 or 2 that you think you'll be going less.
So one that I'm particularly excited about is just personal, because I love Scotch whiskey. It's actually Indian single malts. They've been a category that has been growing for the last few years. I've seen a few already in the US market, but I'm super excited to see that one. Again, and just because I love Scotch whiskey. So that specific expression, I'm super excited about. I feel like, of course, agave spirits, tequila, mezcal, it's been booming for a while. Like, all the celebrities are doing their own label of tequila, but particularly now, and specifically in the place that I work, and I feel like it's a trend. People, they are going towards more non-additive expressions of tequila. So I would like to see, and they're actually drifting away from the popular brands because of the same reason. So I would like to see the big brands try to come and play in that field, and starting get it certified, or doing something just to consolidate the category, and like they are the big players for a reason, right? And it's
Mhm.
just, of course, money and marketing and stuff. But I'm telling you, like the non-additive spirits, they are taking away a big percentage of the marketing population just because people are more concerned nowadays. What are they drinking actually? So I would like to see that coming as well.
Great. Jacopo, what do you see growing, and maybe one or two things that you see on a decline?
So funny enough, I mean, Nora
Growing.
was saying before that in 2016 she started working for as a brand ambassador for Sid. But right after Sid and in that period of time, the non-alcoholic category was not pretty much existing. Right after that, probably I saw just a few other ones coming, but never exploded, or like the quality was never there. Beside actually Sitley, funny enough. And this category, in my opinion, right now, this new generation we're facing, is not drinking as the older one. So I would love to see a little bit more this category coming a little bit more, as instead for a category that I mean, California is pretty strong with tequila, and I agree that many people right now are asking for products with no additives, and what I will see probably, I'm not sure that this Cristallino that people are investing a lot of money, it will keep up.
What do you see, Nora, in trends?
Yeah, I just want to say, Jacopo and Dayonel, I 100% agree. I think that the additive free thing is really exciting to see that particularly the US market is really starting to rally around those additive free tequilas. And then also an agreement about kind of the quality and the evolution that's happening in the non-alc category, definitely in response to the younger generation of consumers. But the market is completely blown out in a way that, like, there's a lot of not so great stuff out there as well, but there's a lot of really, really good stuff, really good products that are being produced. In addition to those things, I get really excited when I see brands that are kind of beyond category. So, looking at like Empirical, for instance, people who are creating spirits that are kind of a little bit like genre bending and trying things that are just really new and experimental. They might not always be, the top seller or, the most kind of refined spirit, but I think there's a lot of kind of excitement about the opportunities that genre bending can open up for cocktail makers, but also for other, distillers and other spirit makers. I also get really excited about seeing ancestral and kind of heritage products on the market that are treated properly and honored properly. We see that, the whole spectrum of that with agave spirits, and I love being able to taste things that have this really kind of deep ancient history that are maybe only recently available in my market, but that are treated properly, and the folks that have been making them for generations are honored in the right way by the company that is bringing them to me. And then kind of, in a similar vein, seeing heirloom grain spirits, seeing single grain spirits, seeing spirits that are really kind of true expressions of really specific agricultural products. I get really excited about that too. I think there's an element in there of looking at sustainability and looking at kind of regenerative farming and looking at things that are speak to our history in the United States and also to the history of different lands throughout the globe. And I get really excited when I see things like that enter the market.
Susan, what do you see in off trade?
I think those trends very much that have been raised by everybody here I mean, we see a through line to this, right? I mean, people looking at, authenticity, heritage, sustainability and moderation, right? Health. So all of those things I think are really huge in this category, not only here, but also reflecting wine as well. So I think this is an overall in terms of the way our sort of cultural sense of well-being has been going is that direction. And so any of these,
that's more of a consumer change, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we are going to have to reflect, what that is. And I think the market is reflecting this consumer mindset. And so I think one of the wonderful things about, again, no alcohol, but also sessionable sizes. Like, I don't know if we're talking about like, for off premise here, like, selling sizes that are single serve and maybe some inventive ways, like, there are a lot of ready to drink, type of cocktails. And so if you can, create something that goes into that category, you can reach customers that you may not have otherwise reached with, just your spirit alone in that category. So that's always a way to do it. I know that this isn't a distilled spirit, but like, white port, a fortified wine that was struggling for a while to get anybody to drink it, not think of it as like back in the day, Britons and colonialism and all that sort of thing. Well, they started making canned cocktails, and they just reached a whole audience that wasn't there before. Croft Pink and that everything, like, it's an incredible story, and I think it applies in many cases here. I mean, think outside the box or the bottle or what have you. So another category I think is interesting for me is shochu and Japanese distilled spirits. I think there's a lot of potential there. There's so much awareness that's actually starting to happen now, thanks to people really trying to get out there and distributors starting to come in and bringing in more of these, but just educational awareness, at seminars like SomCon and TechSom and things like that. But what I think is really interesting is that this plays into the moderation aspect and the heritage aspect, because not only have these distillers been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, they have fascinating stories. They come from different parts of Japan, which have entirely different terroirs, like using entirely different kind of rice in Okinawa versus for their shochu versus, it's a different name, it's called awa, right? Versus somewhere else. And they can be really used beautifully in cocktails. And from New York to San Francisco, like Japanese lo-fi bars are like popping up everywhere. They're getting really popular. And these can be drinks that are, with ice and everything like that. It's not going to hit you too hard, And so it's sessionable. You can have more of it and you don't have to overindulge. It's really lends itself well to that.
Jacopo, I'll just read out the question. Our product is in small sub-segment. Amaro is a subsegment of the liqueur, which is a subsegment of spirits, which we know. Our strength lies in our taste. How do you suggest we effectively sell our product when we are unable to provide a tasting opportunity?
It's pretty tough. Without tasting the product, it's really tough. But I would definitely emphasize the exceptional tasting profile of your products, leveraging a little bit also in a really well curated storytelling, a detailed product description that explain not what you do, but how you do it. Visuals can really be helpful also in a way, like a well-curated brochure or like a really nice presentation. And I want to say probably lastly, customer and bartender testimonials for sure definitely could really help. And it honestly, I also acquired like a product based on a recommendation from bartenders and without even tasting it prior. So probably, I want to say like a good partnership with bartenders and customer testimonials. Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe you can speak for your own bar as well, or general trend, but pretty much the same things. Where are some gaps? Like, what are actual demands right now that you're all are trying to ask your distributors?
This is something that was even in the previous question. I want to say like a ready to drink cocktails is something that I would love to see a good quality. And probably also going back, yes, there are a lot of other products that are not alcohol, but like in terms of non-alcoholic beers or wines, especially, I would love to fill a little bit more gaps and to see a little bit more quality products.
Daniel, with the economy in the state where people are not buying premium brands as easily, what strategy would you recommend? Since lowering prices is not all the strategic product positioning. So I think the question is, how do you sell expensive, premium brands? Or I mean, do you see a decline, or what's your take on this? Like, have you seen a little bit of dip in premium category?
I mean, it depends on the target, right? And the demographics. Like, it depends on the different establishment that you work at. Me working in a Michelin star rated restaurant, we have really high-end expressions of different brands, and they are always moving somehow, right?
Mhm.
So it kind of all depends on the setting and the demographics. But of course, I feel like the high-end products, the worst enemy they have is lack of knowledge. When you have, I mean, the first phase to the suggestion is always the front of the house stuff in a restaurant, correct? So they are the ones talking about the brand. They are the ones suggesting, like, piggybacking on the last question, for example, if you don't have the knowledge to suggest, right, or you don't feel confident knowing the product, it's really hard for people to suggest it. And when you have a really good server or bartender who has a lot of knowledge and detailed knowledge about the brand, they can make you fall in love of the spirit or makes you want to try it or gives like crave for it just by describing it, right? So that's powerful. That's really powerful. So training
Pretty
staff
much hand selling, training staff, right? Like
yeah,
use the staff.
yeah, exactly. So if you properly train the staff and you tell them everything about it and the flavor profiles, the stories. Story is powerful. The biggest brands or the iconic, most luxury brands, they sell a story, right? They don't sell, let's say, the product itself, but it's a story, or somehow they make you. If you, let's say, the brands, of course, luxury brands, it's inspirational, right? So if you have this brand, it makes you feel different, right? So it's the same with spirits. If you want to try it, you're part of an exclusive group of people, right? So training staff is really important for them to be able to suggest it, to talk about it confidently, and make you feel comfortable when you're ordering, right? For example, I feel like flights, it can be an interesting option. For example, if you have a high-end spirit that is not rotating because of the price point, but if you somehow create flights of the same expression in different aging statements, for example, instead of $50 for one each shot of the highest end, you can charge, I don't know, 70 and have three different expressions, less ounces, for example, and you have a 12, 15, and 18. So you taste the difference between the different age statements until you get to the highest end. So then people, they feel more comfortable and they're like, okay, I tried three for a little bit more price. And then they, oh no, I really enjoyed the last one. So they feel more comfortable. Okay, no, I'm willing to pay now the price for the highest expression because I tried, I see the difference, I see the value. So flights can be an option as well, for sure. And the one that I mentioned before, again, the dinners. Um, High brands, of course, they have a specific niche market, right, of people in target, which they can afford to actually enjoy them. But again, if you promote a dinner based or a menu based on that spirit and pairing in different settings, and people, they get excited about it because they're not just going to pay for the drink but for the dinner, the experience overall, right? You have people talking about the story and all about the different details and how it's produced and
Yeah,
this
you
and
build
that.
up some access things like you're a club member, you get this access to meet the distiller or something like that.
Exactly. So that's a really cool experience, and people they generate some loyalty and they actually fall in love with the brand. They feel part of something special, and that's a good
I think there
experience
is a
to
lot
try.
of things you can learn from the high end bourbons of US. Like some crazy pricing and what's happening there. One more quick question: do buyers like exclusive brands, like in your portfolio? Let's say bartenders or even the retail. Like, do you Is that a big thing? Like if a salesperson is pitching you that, okay, I'm not going to sell in 15 miles around you.
Yeah, of course. Exclusivity is always is a key component on a high-end expression of a spirit. You build, of course, a relationship and you build a program towards getting allocations of those exclusive bottles, right? And most of the places they work towards that goal, of course, because having that exclusive bottle, it makes the difference. You build a top shelf, of course, that people they enjoy, and they like
Hmm.
to see that you have that exclusivity of those bottles, of course. So it's really important to have and develop that program that you can um, build the top shelf for your customers to enjoy and to have the opportunity to be able to taste at your place. So yeah, we love it. It's amazing.
Nora, how big of a role does social media play when making a buying decision? So do you see accounts, followers, or engagement? What's your take on this as a part of the buying? Yes or no?
I don't put too much weight, honestly, on a social media following. I will say, and y'all probably got this impression from my answers thus far, that I focus mostly on premise. So, it's a little bit of a different introduction to somebody coming in and having an experience in buying than it is to just purchase something off the shelf. So when I'm curating a back bar or when I'm putting together a cocktail menu, I'm not really thinking about how many people are already exposed to and aware of this product, how excited are they about it, how engaged are they with on social media with this product. I'm thinking about what's something that's really cool and unique that I can present to people in a way that is going to elevate their experience in this space, right?
Mm.
So it's a little bit less important to me, that social media kind of just in general, the following and the exposure. I will say, as somebody who spends way too much time on social media, that for better or worse, that I do make sure that I follow any brands that I'm paying attention to or that I'm using. And there are certain things that I look for with those brands. One of the things is I always try to see how are they supporting bartenders, how are they supporting the bar community, in their social media posts. So are they is there a focus or a spotlight on the bar industry, or are they only focused on at home consumers? I think that level of engagement and support for the bar community is really, really meaningful and goes a long way. Another thing I look for is how do their values and their story align with my bar or with the account that I'm buying for. We've mentioned story many times on this call, and it's, I'll mention it again and again because it is, one of the most important things. Obviously, the liquid in the bottle is incredibly important, but the story that backs that up, it not only has to be real and told well, but it also has to be authentic and genuine.
Mm.
Like many of us were told a story about a bourbon that ended up in a bottle and this distillery that it came from, when actually that liquid was bought from, a mass producer in Illinois or wherever. Right. So, it's very important that we're told a real story about the product in the bottle, and that it's not a fairy tale, right? Like we don't need to hear the same story about every product. Every product isn't a tiny family owned, multi-generational, grain to glass, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. That's not, we don't have that expectation. We don't expect every product to be that. But we do need to understand why this exists in the world and why we should be sharing it with the people that trust in us and our brand, right? So it's, that authenticity and the ability to be genuine and to be transparent, I think is very, very important. And social media is a great place to, I think Susan's point earlier, to kind of bring you in and have those behind the scenes and kind of like intimate moments with that brand. And then finally, I'm looking for, just a sense of kind of, diversity, and making sure that like they're reaching out to communities that maybe aren't always represented. So I'm just, I'm looking for something that is dynamic, that has a authenticity and a real story, and that is engaging with the people that are important to me, which is, you know, my bar team.
You gave us what to post, which is very good for the brands. Jacopo, what spirits category? I think we've touched this question, so I'll skip this. One quick one, Susan, for you. Is gin still a growing market, or has it reached its maximum? And I think it's been a while, right? This question has been hanging in for 5 years now, I think.
And it is, technically speaking, it is growing. It is growing, okay. According to Statista and everything, like, you know, it is growing at a CAGR of 4.2% during the forecast period of 22 to 28. So it is still a growing market, but I'm really excited here by Arthur wrote in one of the questions, they just won the world's best London dry gin, a Brazilian's distillery. Okay, so this goes right into what this is, because as Sid, you were saying earlier, so one of the best ways to be able to promote a brand is not just to talk about your brand, but also to educate people about the category itself. In this case, gin, I think one of the biggest areas for gin, besides the, you know, what Nora touched upon with the seed lift, with the no alcohol, but if you're just a general gin category, is the fact that it's like wine, you can really, really go into a sense of place. Terroir can be really important for a gin, and there is an increasing trend of you know, wonderful on-premise bartenders looking at sharing all the different ways that they'll use like different gins for very specifically different cocktails, right? Ways to do classic cocktails. Like I think the Bacardi Global Consumer Survey this year came up with, like, you know, the gin and tonic is the #1 cocktail, and I would think Negroni and martinis are always going to be still popular, and gin is still the preferred. And people are really talking about the different kinds of riffs they do on it using very specific gins. And not only that, there has been featured of different types of gin used for tiki cocktails, where it's not, you know, as traditionally seen before too. And so I think really educating people about terroir. So in this case for Arthur, why Brazilian gin? What made it special? How did you win that award? You know, I mean, definitely educate people on that, taste people on that, tell your story and what makes that gin special. And I think that is probably one of the biggest areas of opportunity. The US still remains the #2 global market for gin, and it's still growing. The UK is #1, but as you might imagine, but the US is still #2 and still going strong. And there's still showing growth here, positive growth, maybe about 4% in the super premium categories. Now, some categories have actually fallen a little bit, but usually that's pretty much on the low end, mirroring also the wine market. Premiumization trend is very strong here. And so being able to harness the understanding of, you know, where your gin is coming from and like, why do you exist? And being able to help educate people on that is one of the biggest opportunities for gin right now, with so many people getting into such fun cocktails. So
I think one of the gins what people can study, I personally, which I loved, it was the Bar Hill gin success story recently. Like, you know, how nicely they've grown, and I think people can have a look at that. I think one more thing, which is it still doesn't have strong US competition, right? US distilleries are still focused on the whiskeys and whatnot. So at least it's the import category is still pretty much good, not you know, competed by so much US distilleries, I guess, right? I mean, you guys can give me.
And there's some really interesting brands that have really come up from different places where you might not necessarily think of gin. Sustainability, is the other trend. Like if you're organic, doing things like, you know, I mean, because gin is such a botanic creature, I mean, showing that you have really natural, driven and sustainability driven types of ingredients can be a huge factor as well here, and what people are seeing. Like Leonardelli gin is organic, and it's from Italy, right? And so we're starting to see other gins coming up and starting to get noticed because of, you know, the way that they use like their own special, you know, just even in their packaging. They have a 100% cotton, unique, like velvety, you know, packaging that they do, which I think is really important too. I mean, that will tell your story and what you represent. Yeah, it's another Italian one in Ciso gin. I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, these are some brands that are really coming from an innovative, but they're not looking at gin just for gin, but in terms of an entire experiential product, right? From the package, from the storage, the packaging, the concept, everything. So
Nice.
yeah.
I think, good to know that it's at least still growing and not on a decline. Daniel, what are the best months of the year to start a conversation with the distributor?
For me and my perception, I mean, timing and details, demographics and targets are key, right? But I feel like the beginning of the semester, always January or July, August, after the end of the fiscal year, it's it would be preferable just because, again, if you're looking as a buyer to build a program that can get you allocations or something like that, then you have a few months to get to that goal. If you're in the middle, you know you're not gonna get those expressions, so maybe you will shy away from starting a conversation, right, about a new product. But I feel like those work pretty well. And again, if you're working with a cocktail bar, which they do seasonal releases or seasonal menus, and they change their menu 4 times a year, 2 times a year, those factors are really important. So you have to pay attention to those ones, and and that's when probably you have to start building that relationship, right? But it depends mostly on how the program moves and changes during the year, right? And working in the allocation program as well.
I think, if you are pitching a distributor, maybe February would be the best time, right? Because they all want to knock your doors around first week of March or last week of February, to get things going. Before January would be a sort of cash flow back to business, right? Like you don't want to buy anything.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, after the season, that's true for the most part. But you can start just knocking the doors, presenting some of the products, and like, hey, this is coming for the next season, for the next year, right? And start just having those conversations for them to keep the product in mind, and then after to make the actual purchase, probably. So yeah.
So, what are the three main things that you consider when looking at buying a brand for your business?
So for me, the most important is flavor, right? I need to feel like the spirit brings value from the craft of the liquid itself, right? So flavor is really important. The story, like I said, for me, it's so powerful to be able to sell the story, to take people to a journey, uh, to a different culture, to I don't know, to a moment. So that's really important for me. The story is really powerful. The presentation, it's sometimes it's key. Like again, there is different categories, right? But sometimes labels, they convey a different message, and probably they are too colorful or too artistic, or that there is some details and nuances, some elegant, simple labels. But again, if you're telling a different story and that conveys in your bottle, in the presentation, your label, the shape of your bottle, it depends also on what message it's your brand trying to convey. And again, just because of the nutrients, the non-additives, organic, non-GMO, all those things, they're key for specific markets. So those are things to look at for sure.
Quick one for you, Jacopo. What are the best states to start selling your brand? Let's say if you had to pick one or two for an import spirits brand for US.
California for sure. California for sure. And I mean, it depends like how big your brand is, but I mean, there are plenty. I want to say probably Nevada for big numbers, or like where the cocktail culture is really strong, even Louisiana. It's pretty strong, the cocktail culture, and Florida, Illinois, Texas. Yeah, but definitely I would start with California.
Nora, you want to touch base on your three most important criteria when you buy a brand, and maybe Jacopo, you can also list your three criteria, because this would be the main things for sellers to know.
I think integrity. We mentioned story again. Story is so important. Flavor, liquid, and price point is hugely important. I hate to make that the top three, but unfortunately, it's in the top three.
Jacopo?
Yeah, so I want to say sustainability, quality of the product, heritage, I want to say.
Susan?
there was wonderful things said by both Jacopo and Nora. I would just add, how does it fit in my existing, what I'm carrying right now, in my existing inventory? What gaps do I have? Or is it something I hadn't thought of and can be a value add? So I really have to take into account what I'm currently carrying and how this may or may not fit in terms of that. So that's an important consideration to build upon everything wonderful that has already been said.
Super. So I think let's pass on the mic to Ankita. Ankita, could you just read a couple of questions that people still have in the chat?
So I have so the questions are not being redirected to anyone. So feel free to jump in, Susan, Dayonel, Jacopo, and Nora. So the first question is, what buyers look for in a tequila pitch? So with so many brands on the market and so little difference between all the tequila brands, and because of the appellation of the origin, what sort of a tequila pitch do usually a buyer look for?
So I want to say once again, it's about no additives. That it's really, in my opinion, it's really important. The way that the tequila is produced, where the agave, if it's agave that you can find in the state, the quality of the water that it's being used to filter, and how filter to dilute it, but also like the how it's filtered. It's really important.
All right.
Can I add something to that question?
Yes, Dana, please.
So tequila, there's a lot of particular steps when you're producing tequila, right? Some people, they do some extra steps, some others they don't, and just a few, they do the whole path, right? For quality. So I feel like, for example, for tequila, for me, for example, I always pay attention to when they do the HEMA, the harvest. So for example, by law, it was reduced a few years ago because it was supposed to be 6 years before. Now it's 5. And some of the big brands are like, oh, there's no organoleptic changes in the agave sugars after 5 years, so it doesn't matter. But it does. To me, it does. So I pay attention to those things, the harvesting of the agave, how long it takes, right? And again, something that is for sure really interesting right now, it's the kind of oak that you use to maturate or age your tequilas. So if they're being playful with the kind of oak that they use, European oak, secondhand sherry, secondhand this, orange wine, those things, they might be a little bit playful and interesting for people to actually pay attention to your brand. So again, the steps that you do with your process and the kind of oak that you use, it might be key component for sure.
All right. So the next question is, how important is price when introducing a new product in the US market? This is a rum brand, so they want to ask that how important the price is going to be.
Price is important. I would say, in short, it is. Again, it depends on the account. So if you're working for a Michelin star restaurant that has the ability to bring in higher priced products, that has the ability to sell their clientele on higher cost cocktails, it becomes kind of, obviously less important. But I think for most retail and most on-premise, we unfortunately, we have to constantly look at price, and we have to look at our pour cost, and we have to look at our percentages and make sure that everything is lining up to budget. I think rum in particular is challenging because there's a lot of very cheap rums out there that we have access to, and some of them are really good quality and some of them are not. So I think that there's something sticky there about if you're unable to compete on price, making sure that story kind of eclipses the price itself and transcends beyond that and has a reason for that, that higher price tag. But yeah, in general, I think it's important to just attack price head on in conversations and make sure that it's being talked about transparently. And if there's other ways to support the account, if the price feels a little bit out of reach, whether that be through education or through, again, happy hours or other types of on-trade activations, that is shared upfront. So that can be factored in.
If I can just add something, I think that makes It's totally, I agree with you there, Nora. That was really wonderfully put. I think one of the biggest things is also how are you positioning yourself? Decide what category you're in, and be able to tell the story to justify the price for that. Because as Nora pointed out, rum can run the gamut between really value to super premium. And make sure that you're also targeting accounts. If you're super premium, target accounts that are able to support something like that, like, special cocktails or something that would be able to feature rum, right? Or, tiki bars that, like, there are several in San Francisco that would be, huge on looking at this. So what differentiates you within your price category? So make sure that you really understand where you stand, do your research on what your pricing is within the category that you want to be in, and make sure that you target the accounts and have that would make sense for that, have good synergies with your sort of aspirational lifestyle and target, and then your story to go along with that.
Now, if I can add something, like I was really surprised when I moved to the US because coming from South America, rum is a huge category, and I have the privilege to work and actually enjoy beautiful, beautiful rums from all around the world. And when I moved here, I realized that rum is not a strong category in the US. I was really surprised. There are many, many brands that we don't get here in the country. And I was a little bit shocked. But again, yeah, like Susan, she pointed out, it has to be a specific type of tiki bars, cigar bars, and depends on the category of rum that you have. If you have a mixing rum for cocktails, if you have a sipping rum, that it can compete alongside some cognacs or whiskeys. So yeah, you have to be able to identify those targets and really go to that specific market. Otherwise, rum in general, it's a little challenging here in the US.
So I'll read this question in the meantime. I think I don't know if Nora is still in the call, but we may have lost her. So I think one of the question was how many speakers come from having launched a brand, and what has been your biggest challenge, and how did you start your journey, and would you do it differently if you started again, and what would you do differently? So maybe I would love to take this one because I myself have done this and for 7 years, and I've knocked doors, and I built a 100,000 case brand. So one of the things, I would say in bullet points is simply that time I did not know the business and actually worked better because I just went in, and the less you knew, the more you just go. So first is be trained correct. At that time, Australian category was super hot. Yellowtail was number one. It was $7.99. So my wine was $6.99, and I just was trained correct, right? Don't fight against the market. That's what I would advise. Like we know that, for example, some categories are on decline. Some things are just going to be tough. That's a reality. It's no point, going so hard on yourself and trying to convince yourself that this will work when the buyers are actually not looking for. So that's my one actual tip. Then otherwise, accept the reality that you're just going to sell less next 2 years, and then sort of start playing that way or increase the margins and lower the volumes. The second thing which I learned was the payments, So don't be, because when you start, you will say yes to a lot of things. You will say yes to retailers, you will say yes to small distributors, and then you will get burnt with the money. So don't sacrifice your business on a bad, risky play. That I had like big bad debts from my distributors, right? And then that is a very risky proposition. So when you're working on a 20% business and when you have high risk of a small distributors, they will just not pay you. If your product doesn't sell, they'll not pay you. You got to understand that. I'm sure most of you have experienced that. So if you don't have a repeat business, you're out of business, right? So make sure that your product sells, and then you send a second order to your distributors. And the same goes with the bartenders and the retailers. The product has to move. Is sort of the golden rule for this. If your product doesn't move, you will be out of the business soon. And it's just a delusion then. Yeah, you will think that your product, you're doing this much, but in reality, the money is not in your pocket. It's in accounts receivable, it's in inventory, but it's not in your pocket. So unless the product moves, right? So that was another lesson. And the final one I would say is focus on repeat business. So the fourth order of a distributor, sixth order of a retailer, then you're talking about, until then, every time you got to keep on going. So I just posted one post on my Instagram in my tips today. 2 simple rules, like promise the retailer a profit story, a value prop, like why they will make money off your brand, how they will make money, how much they will make money, and then back it up with that story. So if I pitch to Jacopo saying, hey, Jacopo, give me a chance, buy my one case. I'll come Friday and do the store tasting. I'll make sure it sells. That's all. And then I come Friday, I make sure it sells. And then I ask him for another 2 cases for Monday. I do it again. And that's how you build the brand. That's it. You stick with that, and that's what you build pretty much. And then you cold call. So I think that's my journey. What I would do different is, as I said, I would not be delusional. I would, not give my orders to the third purchase order who has not paid me. I would first collect the payment and then sort of continue the business, because payments is the real metric. That is a real answer from the buyer, whether they like you or whether your product sells or not.